April 17th, 2026. 4 o'clock in the morning in the Taiwan Strait. A Japanese warship enters the most tense waters on the planet. Its name is Ikazuchi. Thunder in Japanese. It's alone, and it's going to enter slowly, on purpose, into waters that all of China has sworn to defend at any cost. China has the largest navy in the world. More than 370 warships. 3 aircraft carriers. China tracks the Ikazuchi with fighter jets and ships for 14 straight hours. And China doesn't fire a single shot. Japan comes in, goes through the strait like it owns the place, and leaves whenever it wants. China issues a statement with harsh words. That's it. No interception. No ultimatum. Nothing. But what made the Chinese state media lose control in the following hours was not the ship. It was the date. Because Japan didn't choose April 17th by chance. They chose the most humiliating day on the Chinese calendar. And they sent a ship called Thunder precisely to remind China of that. But those 14 hours weren't just a provocation. They were a warning. Japan just set a trap against China. Nobody in the Chinese government knows how to disarm it. To understand why those 14 hours were so impactful, you need to go back 131 years to 1895. In that year, Japan and China went to war. China was an ancient empire, the most populous in the world. Japan, an island that had spent decades modernizing in silence. All the analysts at the time were betting on a Chinese victory. But China lost quickly and badly. In less than a year, the Japanese army destroyed the Chinese navy. They invaded Manchuria, and they threatened to advance on the empire's capital. The Chinese emperor understood that it was over. He sent his top representative, a man named Li Hongzhang, to negotiate peace at any cost. Li tried to resist, but China had lost the war. Japan had the knife and the cheese in hand. On April 17, 1895, in a Japanese coastal city called Shimonoseki, Li Hongzhang signed the treaty that handed Taiwan over to Japan. It was one of the most painful episodes of what the Chinese still call the Century of Humiliation. The period when China was invaded, divided, and exploited by other more powerful countries. Every Chinese person learns this in school. And 131 years later, on the exact anniversary of that open wound, Japan sent a warship to the strait that separates Taiwan from the Chinese mainland. And it wasn't just any ship. The destroyer is called Ikazuchi. In Japanese, it means thunder. It belongs to the Murasame class, a group of destroyers built with the same design. It entered service in 2001, with 25 years of active service. It's not the most modern ship in the Japanese fleet. That position belongs to the Maya-class destroyers, equipped with state-of-the-art American combat systems. But the Ikazuchi, well, it's heavy, armed, and respected. Any navy in the world thinks twice before provoking a ship of this size. But there's one detail about it that makes this choice even more provocative. The entire Murasame class was named after destroyers from the former Imperial Japanese Navy, the same ships that fought against China in World War II. The current Ikazuchi inherited the name of an Imperial destroyer that sailed the Pacific in the 1940s. The names are not a coincidence. They are a deliberate decision by the modern Japanese Navy, which makes a point of preserving the continuity between the imperial past and the present. Japan has more than 40 modern destroyers in operation. He could have sent any of them, but he chose Thunder on Shimonoseki's anniversary. Coincidence isn't enough to explain this. But why are they doing this now? Why specifically April of 2026? The answer lies in the 40 days before. Between March and April of 2026, China spent more than a month conducting military exercises around Taiwan. It wasn't a routine exercise. The People's Liberation Army, which is the official name of China's armed forces, with Navy, fighter jets, and ground troops, was rehearsing in real time how to blockade the island by sea. Chinese ships were surrounding Taiwan in increasingly aggressive formations. Fighter jets were crossing the invisible line that divides the strait in half. A border that, for decades, was respected, but that China has been violating more and more in recent years. It was a rehearsal. A rehearsal for an invasion broadcast live to the world. Xi Jinping was personally supervising everything. And the message was clear. China was getting closer and closer to crossing the line between threat and action. The whole world was waiting for an American response. More sanctions, more arms sales to Taiwan, tough statements from the United States. What no one expected was that the response would come from Japan. And here is the calculation that the Chinese strategists got wrong. For 80 years, Japan lived under a pacifist constitution that prohibited offensive military actions. China was betting that this tradition would continue to weigh heavily. That Japan would protest with words, as it always has, but would not put a warship inside the strait. That it would remain paralyzed, as in so many previous crises. China was wrong, and it was badly mistaken. 4:02 in the morning, April 17, 2026. Ikazuchi enters the Taiwan Strait. It's dark. The crew knows exactly what they're doing. They know that China is watching. They know that every Chinese radar on the mainland has detected the presence of the ship, and it keeps moving forward, slowly. A Murasame-class destroyer can reach 55 kilometers per hour. The Taiwan Strait is 370 kilometers long. If the Ikazuchi wanted to cross at maximum speed, it would take 7 hours. It took almost twice as long. For 14 straight hours, it showed it was in no hurry, and that it would leave whenever it wanted to. In Beijing, the Chinese military command responsible for the eastern part of the country mobilizes fighter jets and ships to track the Ikazuchi. They document every movement, every coordinate, every change of course. But they don't intercept. The Chinese Ministry of Defense issues a formal protest. The spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs describes the passage as a deliberate provocation and a mistake upon mistake. The Chinese Army newspaper publishes an editorial accusing Japan of new militarism. Words, just words. At 1750, the Ikazuchi leaves the strait. No hurry. Without asking for permission. Without firing a single shot. One of the biggest provocations between nuclear powers in decades. Ended without a single shot being fired. And only one question remained. Why didn't China react? China didn't shoot for two reasons. And both are embarrassing. The first one is the most obvious. Japan and the United States have had a mutual defense agreement since 1960. Under the treaty, the United States is obligated to defend any territory under Japanese administration that is attacked. If China had fired on a Japanese military ship on a mission, Washington would have every legal and political justification to intervene. And the US Navy in the Pacific is already positioned, just a few hours from any point in the strait. A shot, and China wouldn't be at war with Japan. It would be at war with the world's top military power. The second reason is more subtle, and in many ways harsher. Firing at a foreign ship, inside the Taiwan Strait, would amount to admitting, in practice, that those waters are not under China's jurisdiction. China has been arguing for decades that the strait is part of its own maritime territory, and that foreign military ships only pass through there with a kind of implicit consent. If you open fire on a ship crossing that area, you're telling the world that yes, that area is contested. Other countries have a legitimate right to be there. And there was only a reaction because the ship is Japanese. And if that space is disputed, the 75-year narrative that Taiwan is an indivisible part of China collapses with a single shot. The Chinese government was caught between two defeats. It chose the less painful one, do nothing. To have more than 370 warships didn't make any difference. But the real humiliation, the one that no Chinese spokesperson could admit, wasn't in what China failed to do that day, but in what that passage revealed about the future. But before I explain the trap, look at the map and notice a detail, where Japan begins and where it ends. What most people see is an island country, but Japan is not an island. It's a group of thousands of islands that stretches for 3,000 kilometers from the far north until it almost touches Taiwan. The main island where Tokyo is located is at the center of this arc. Further south is Okinawa. Even further south, smaller and smaller islands. The last island, Yonaguni, is only 110 kilometers from the coast of Taiwan. This arc has a name in Chinese military manuals. They call it the First Island Chain. And they see it exactly as it is, a natural wall that isolates China from the Pacific Ocean. And here we are, to the problem that China can't solve. Look, if China invades Taiwan, they'll need to send their fleet to the open Pacific. Because the force that can stop the invasion, the American Navy, doesn't come through the South China Sea. It comes from the Pacific, from bases in Hawaii, in Guam, and on the west coast of the United States. To block those reinforcements before they reach Taiwan, China needs to position its submarines, aircraft carriers and destroyers east of the Japanese islands. But to get there, the Chinese fleet has a main route, a stretch of sea called Miyako Strait. The Miyako Strait is located between two Japanese islands. It is 270 kilometers wide. It seems like a lot, but out of those 270, almost 90 kilometers are territorial waters of Japan. And the entire strait is within a maritime area that falls under Japan's economic jurisdiction, monitored by radar and patrol planes 24 hours a day. Japan can't stop it alone from Chinese ships passing in times of peace. But in war, the story changes. In war, Japan can close the Miyako Strait in a matter of hours. And not just close it, they can turn that strait into a fleet graveyard. To understand the scale of this trap, picture what's already in place today. On the southernmost Japanese islands, including Yonaguni and Ishigaki, Japan has installed Type 12 anti-ship missile batteries. These missiles can practically reach the entire stretch of the strait, through which the Chinese fleet would need to pass. Each missile flies low, fast, and is extremely difficult to intercept. Underwater, the scenario is even worse for China. An American-Japanese sensor system, informally called the Hook, passes through Yonaguni Island and stretches for hundreds of kilometers. Any Chinese submarine trying to cross the Miyako Strait towards the Pacific passes over these sensors. In peacetime, they only detect. In wartime, they detect and transmit in real time the position to Allied fighters and submarines. In Okinawa, there are 30,000 American soldiers undergoing continuous training, and 2 Japanese helicopter carriers are being converted to operate F-35 fighter jets, the same fighter jets that the United States currently considers the most important in its Air Force. The largest navy in the world found that the size of the fleet doesn't solve the problem of geography. The paradox is cruel. To invade Taiwan, China needs its fleet to reach the Pacific. To reach the Pacific, it needs to pass through Miyako, and Miyako is Japanese. In other words, for the invasion to work, Japan needs to stand by, while a war is happening 100 kilometers from its islands. And on April 17, 2026, Japan sent a ship called Thunder on a 14-hour journey through the Taiwan Strait, making it clear publicly that it will not stand by. But, after all, what changed in Japan for the country to get here? For 80 years, Japan was effectively disarmed under its constitution. Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, written under American supervision after World War II, explicitly prohibited Japan from having forces, offensive military forces. It was pacifism by law. That started to change gradually over the course of the 2010s. But it sped up in a dramatic way in October of 2025, when the Japanese parliament swore in a prime minister named Sanae Takaichi. She is the first woman in the country's history to hold the position and a political disciple of Shinzo Abe, the prime minister who began to rewrite Japan's military rules. In November of 2025, answering a question in Parliament, Takaichi said out loud what no Japanese prime minister had ever said before: that a Chinese attack on Taiwan would be, under Japanese law, a threat to Japan's own survival. In practice, it signaled that Japan may use military force to defend Taiwan. The reaction of the Chinese government was immediate and uncontrolled. China banned imports of Japanese seafood. The Chinese consul in Osaka posted on social media that Takaichi should be beheaded without hesitation. Donald Trump, then President of the United States, called Takaichi and asked her in a friendly tone to tone down her rhetoric so as not to hinder negotiations with China. Takaichi did not back down. 5 months later, the destroyer Ikazuchi entered the Taiwan Strait. In the following weeks, after the passage, China did what it usually does when it loses a symbolic dispute. It sent warships for exercises in the Pacific, announced new weapons systems, and accused Japan of reviving militarism. But the message had already been sent. For Xi Jinping, his life's project to reunify Taiwan with mainland China before leaving office just got a lot harder. Not because of anything new said by the United States, nor because Taiwan armed itself better, but because Japan, after 80 years of silence, decided to publicly announce that it will activate the geographical trap if China crosses the line. For 131 years, China waited for the day when it would be able to reverse what happened on April 17th of 1895. On April 17, 2026, Japan made a point of reminding China that this wait might last much longer than 131 years. Now I want to know your opinion. Did Japan play it right by making this provocation on the anniversary of Shimonoseki? Or did it go too far and might be forcing China to react too soon? Write your opinion in the comments below. And if this video helped you understand what's really at stake in the Pacific, share it with someone who needs to see this. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Take care and see you in the next video.